Thieving God Idol. The idol's eye opens while it lies buried under rubble, and it waits. Mikey heads downstairs and encounters thieves purloining the idol from the shop. The Thieving God Idol surfaced in April's shop second time around, listed as price to move, a casual tag for an artifact that belonged to the God of Thieves and operated on theft as its activation condition. You couldn't buy it. Buying it would defeat the entire mechanism. The power only triggered if someone stole it, which meant every customer who walked in, paid the price, and walked out with a bag in hand had participated in the one transaction that guaranteed the idol would never work for them. April kept it on the shelf. The mustached man declined to purchase it. Then thieves stole it on Halloween night. When the idol finally broke, its pieces didn't just fall, and vanished. The gremlins it had summoned vanished at the same moment, simultaneous dissolution across two different states of being. As if the destruction of the vessel required the destruction of everything the vessel had made. No lag, no fade out. One instant there were fragments and gremlins, the next instant there was nothing. The physics of that disappearance suggests the idol's power wasn't contained within its physical form, it was a conduit, and severing the conduit severed everything running through it. The God of Thieves doesn't sell. He takes. And the idol proved it. A buyer walked out satisfied, a thief walked out armed. The same object, the same exchange of hands, two entirely different outcomes depending on whether the transfer involved consent. That's not a glitch in the system. That's the system functioning exactly as designed. Here's where it gets desperate. The idol could have been sitting in that shop for years. Every person who declined to steal it walked away safer than the person who paid. The moral of the object isn't, don't buy cursed artifacts. It's, the God of Thieves will punish you for trying to conduct business with him, and the punishment is that you get exactly what you paid for and nothing more. The thief gets the power. The customer gets a paperweight. Both leave convinced they made the right choice. There's something almost philosophical about a god who built his entire divine portfolio around the distinction between taking and buying. You'd think a deity would want more followers, more worshippers reaching for his idol. But the God of Thieves designed an object that only rewards the people who bypass every social convention his own worshippers are supposed to uphold. The idol doesn't want admirers, it wants accomplices, and the accomplice threshold is high. You have to be willing to commit a theft to find out what the idol actually does. Most people aren't. April's shop stayed open. The idol sat on the shelf. The eye stayed open under the rubble, waiting for someone reckless enough to look away first. Snake eyes. The previous item demonstrated that some divine objects punish you for buying them. Snake eyes shows a darker inversion, the mystical threat that doesn't need you to approach it at all, because it's already inside. Snake eyes is a mystical antagonist in the Archie continuity. That description sounds manageable. Mystical antagonists follow rules. They have summoning conditions, vulnerability windows, counter incantations, the kind of threat a team solves by finding the right ritual or the right artifact. This framing suggests distance. The threat is out there, separate from you, something you confront at arm's length. You look away from the idol, it resumes its attack. You look away from Snake Eyes, it's already moved. The consequence is absolute. You are not safe in your own body. Defenders of the standard mystical antagonist model will point out that every Archie supernatural threat has had a counter, a specific weakness, a ritual reversal, a moment of clarity that breaks the spell. The structure holds across the continuities run. Snake Eyes breaks it by being the spell and the host simultaneously. There's no casting agent to banish. There's no external locus of power to disrupt. The power is operating through the nervous system of someone who looks exactly like every other person in the scene. You can't target the magic without targeting the person, and you can't target the person without asking whether they're still in there at all. Snake Eyes wins because by the time you realize you're fighting it, you're already fighting yourself, and you might not be the one who gets to decide when that fight ends. Subscribe and tell us in the comments, which god you think was the most menacing for the TMNT universe. Let's get back into it. Jagwar, where Toad Baron treats the rainforest like a vacation property he happens to own, Jagwar is the rainforest, a demigod whose entire existence is bound to a biome that is actively dying, which makes him, by extension, a dying god fighting a war that most of the world has chosen not to watch. He's not a mutant, he has no ooze in his story, no lab accident, no radiation exposure that accounts for his abilities. He was born this way, the product of a human warrior named Juntara, who met a powerful jaguar spirit on a quest, and produced from that encounter a child who was always going to be something the ordinary world couldn't classify. Juntara raised Jagwar herself, teaching him everything she knew about the jungle, about survival, about what it meant to guard something that could not guard itself, until he was 12 years old, at which point she left when he came of age and never came back. From that point on, Jagwar was completely on his own. He has been fully self-sufficient since the age of 12, and that is not a soft claim. It means every fight he's ever fought, every boundary he's ever defended, every creature he's ever protected, he's been doing without backup, without a parent to fall back on, without anyone to tell him he can stop. He carved out his existence in the Amazon rainforest of Brazil and made it his life's work to defend every acre of it against anyone who showed up with a chainsaw or a mining claim or any other plan that involved turning a living forest into a commodity. The turtles encountered him during their visit to Amazonas, where he aided the turtles during their time in the Amazon. A situation entirely of other people's making that he walked into anyway, because abandoning people to that kind of fate was never going to be an option for him. He went on to become a founding member of the Mighty Mutanimals, a team that carved out its own identity in the TMNT universe before being later phased out as the Archie TMNT series concluded. And before you write him off as another mutant in a long line of them, he isn't. His mother is human, his father is the jaguar spirit Jagwaro himself, and that distinction isn't theological hair-splitting, it's the entire explanation for why he has the power he has, why he carries the responsibility he carries, and why losing the rainforest isn't just a defeat for him, but an extinction event. The most human thing about Jagwar is that he has been completely self-sufficient since the age of 12, which means every acre of rainforest he ever stood guard over, he was standing guard over it alone. Rat King. He first appeared in the 4th issue of the Tales series dated February 1988, co-created by Ryan Brown and Jim Lawson, a stripped-down figure whose power lay in telepathic command over rats. That was it, originally. No grand plan, no philosophy, just a man who could talk to rodents. And yet within a handful of pages, that bare concept became one of the most unsettling presences the Turtles ever faced, a figure whose defeat required Leonardo to disable him by knocking him off balance with shurikens and sending him tumbling into a silo. That is the contradiction at the center of the Rat King from the start. His toolkit is almost embarrassingly small, and his threat level is anything but. The Archie version, published under the Adventures banner, introduced him with the title Lord Hantan, appearing first in issue 11 of that series. He surfaced in the sewers while the Turtles searched for Shredder, a setting that promised confrontation and instead delivered something stranger. He let them pass. He told them where Shredder was. No fight, no trick, no hidden cost stated up front, just information handed over and a figure vanishing back into the tunnels. That is not the behavior of a villain set up for a showdown. It is the behavior of someone operating on rules the Turtles had not yet learned existed, a tone the Mirage version would echo in the City at War story arc, where the Rat King's corpse continued communicating with Splinter after death. The telepathic reach did not end when the body did. The 1987 animated version pushed further still, and in a direction no one could have predicted from the original comics. Voiced by Townsend Coleman, this Rat King described himself as a rat attempting to overthrow human society and replace it with a new rat order. The same telepathic power over rats that Jim Lawson introduced as a quiet supernatural edge became the foundation of an army. That leap, from sewer mystic to revolutionary strategist, is not a small continuity shift. It is a complete rewrite of what the character is, and it happened because the concept was flexible enough to carry almost any interpretation writers wanted to drop onto it. The underlying ability tracks across every version of the character. These appear consistently whether the Rat King is a Mirage Comics antagonist, an Archie Comics lord, or a 1987 series bomb maker. None of those powers are subtle. None of them are situational. And yet the character is treated in every continuity as a regional threat at best, contained to the sewers or specific underground conflicts, never escalating to the scale his power set should allow. The telepathic control over rats alone, if exploited fully, would make him a force capable of overwhelming almost any opponent the Turtles face. And instead, he is defeated by shurikens, by passing conversations, by the Turtles simply walking past him. His capabilities are disproportionate to his narrative weight, and nobody has ever explained why. Cat Queen. Where the Rat King's reach was limited to one species, the Cat Queen governs the entire feline domain within a divine structure, the Pantheon, that gives her authority over something far larger than herself. She was created by Chris Allen and Stephen Murphy and introduced in the Mirage Studios continuity as the representative guardian of cats, a role that places her inside a formal cosmic hierarchy rather than outside it as the Rat King always was. That structural difference matters. The Rat King existed in the margins. The Cat Queen occupies a seat. What distinguishes her within that pantheon is not her power level, but her emotional attachment to it. She was in love with an alternate universe version of Hamato Splinter, a detail that gives her a personal stake in a figure central to the Turtles' mythos and ties her directly to the family dynamics that drive the entire franchise. That connection is not incidental. That romance anchors the Cat Queen to a figure central to the Turtles' own mythos, and it anchors the Cat Queen to something the viewer already cares about rather than leaving her as a distant deity with a portfolio. Love, in this context, is the narrative hook that justifies giving screen time to a guardian who otherwise might function as little more than divine background decoration. The Cat Queen is also the point where it becomes impossible to keep treating the Pantheon as a random collection of godlike figures. Each member governs a species or domain, which means the Pantheon is not a council, it is an ecosystem, and every seat corresponds to something specific and non-overlapping in the natural world. The Cat Queen holds the cat slot. That arrangement reveals the system behind it. A one-to-one mapping between Pantheon members and animal categories structured with a precision that suggests deliberate design rather than convenient storytelling. The Mirage creators did not scatter god names randomly across the cast. They assigned each one a portfolio and then wrote them accordingly. What that design intent was and why it stopped where it did, why there is a Cat Queen and no Dog Emperor, no Bird Lord, is the question the evidence leaves open, and it is one that no continuity has ever directly addressed. Coyote. Pulling back from the feline guardian of the Mirage Pantheon, we land in a completely different register of divine figure. Coyote, a trickster god who appears as a major supporting ally in the original Mirage and Archie comic continuities. He isn't a guardian or a protector of any kind. Coyote is a trickster deity who appears first in the background of a Donatello dream, retaining his status as a trickster god while serving as an ally. In the Archie continuity specifically, the character retains his trickster nature from his mythological origins while operating within the TMNT universe that typically anchors a trickster figure, leaving only the mechanics of chaos as a storytelling engine. The question becomes what that leaves him able to do and whether he can carry a story the way a more defined deity can. Anyone who knows the archetype from elsewhere will notice the gap immediately. The familiar figure of Coyote from indigenous North American storytelling traditions is a culture hero and transformer. His tricks have consequence, his disruptions serve a larger purpose, and his mischief is embedded in a tradition of teaching through subversion. The Archie continuity version removes all of that. It's the same name attached to a figure who operates without any of the moral or cultural machinery that makes the original meaningful. That reduction is deliberate in its effect. Coyote becomes pure plot disruption, a major supporting ally to Donatello and Radical in the story Dreams of Stone. And before anyone writes this off as a simple translation of a familiar mythological figure into comic form, that's exactly what makes it worth examining. This isn't just Coyote appearing in a new setting, it's the trickster archetype stripped of the specific cultural ground that gave it weight, repurposed as a recurring narrative device for the Archie TMNT universe. The distinction is in what was removed, not just what was kept. The underlying mechanism is that the Archie continuity didn't adapt an existing mythological tradition, it borrowed the shape of one. A trickster deity without the culture that produced him is still a trickster, but he's one who exists purely to disrupt, which is precisely why he shows up the way he does across that continuity's stories. His role is to complicate, not to resolve, and the version of the character the Archie book settled on reflects exactly that. Izanami. The shift from one version of the familiar to something built on entirely different terms. This is Izanami of the Archie continuity, a Japanese creator goddess whose role in the TMNT universe bears almost no resemblance to the classical figure whose name she carries. The 300th issue special places her in Yomi no Kuni, the land of the dead, a location and a designation that immediately reframe what she is within this continuity. She arrives in the story alongside General 8 Thunders, carrying a Kusurigama, a specific weapon with a specific function, sending dead escapees back to Yomi no Kuni. That's the practical edge of her presence, and it's attached to the main story's central crisis, a veil between the living and the dead that is actively tearing, with Izanami positioned as the key figure in what happens next. Her involvement runs deeper than combat logistics. Through her participation in that struggle over the tearing veil, Master Splinter and Tang Shun have been resurrected. The veil itself, that tearing boundary between living and dead, is the real engine of the story, and Izanami is positioned at its center as the figure who can either hold it shut or let it widen further. Here's where it gets specific. The weapon she carries, the Kusarigama, isn't just a tool of combat. It has an exact stated purpose, sending dead escapees back to Yomi no Kuni. General 8 Thunders is with her when it's deployed, and together they represent the enforcement arm of that boundary. The specials don't present this as abstract mythology being referenced. They present it as functional cosmology, a system the story is operating within, with rules that apply to everyone in the narrative, not just background lore. The two resurrections make that system personal. Master Splinter and Tang Shen come back through Izanami's involvement in the Veil struggle, which means their return isn't treated as a writer's choice to undo a death for dramatic convenience. It's treated as the natural outcome of a cosmological event she's already part of. The distinction matters for how the story frames loss and return across the TMNT universe, because it plants the idea that death in this continuity is, under specific conditions, reversible. And before anyone dismisses this as casual mythology mashing, the specialist would push back hard on the surface reading. A folklorist would note that the classical Izanami is a creator deity in Japanese mythology and Shinto religion. None of the cultural or narrative context that makes the original figure coherent as anything other than a name attached to death-themed powers. The cultural machinery is entirely gone. What's left is a figure who operates death mechanics in a comic story, which is a very different thing from adapting a deity into a fictional setting. What actually happened is that the writers needed a mechanism for the 300th issue that could do two things at once: raise the stakes around mortality and provide a pathway for characters who had been written out. The classical Izanami, already associated with death and the boundary between worlds, provided the ready-made shape for that mechanism. The character you see in TMNT No 20 isn't a reinterpretation of the Japanese goddess so much as a narrative function wearing her name, built to give the Veil crisis a figure who could plausibly operate on both sides of it. Balder. And if the gods of Yomi no Kuni at least had the decency to stay dead, the gods of the 2003 TMNT series offer no such relief. Because the Norse deity at the center of their pantheon is by definition the one thing even gods cannot be. Because this version of Balder operates on a premise the show never softens. He is a Norse god in the literal, full-powered mythological sense, which means his death is the event that triggers Ragnarok itself. The 2003 series didn't treat its pantheons as flavor text or supporting characters, it treated them as genuine supernatural forces, and the Norse trinity here is built accordingly. Freya, his sister, is explicitly identified alongside him and Odin as part of a three-deity ruling structure. In Norse mythology, Balder is described as a god of light, beauty, and peace. He's powerful, he's aware, and he has a vested interest in maintaining the cosmic status quo. Here's where it gets worse. Because something has been slowly eroding his immortality, something is eating away at the conditions that keep him alive, and the window for fixing it is measured not in years, but in something shorter and more desperate. The solution, to keep the apocalypse from actually arriving, involves acquiring the heart of another god, a specific piece of divinity that can restore what has been lost. Balder's heart, locked away in a sealed location, is precisely what is needed, and the plot actively revolves around the consequences of people trying to obtain it. Nobody walks away from the machinery of this plotline unchanged, and the entire structure implies that without a specific intervention, the countdown reaches 0 and Ragnarok proceeds. Character motivation didn't matter, the clock mattered. And what makes this land as a category argument rather than just a strong plot beat is what it proves about how the 2003 series treats its gods. They are not a council you can appeal to, not a mythology you can explain away, not a set of symbolic stand-ins. They are real powers with real thresholds, and crossing those thresholds has real consequences the turtles and the audience are made to feel in full. Every other god entry in this video exists in a version of TMNT, where the gods are negotiable, discoverable, or defeatable in some conventional way. Balder is the one who demonstrates that the show had a god in its roster that was never any of those things. That's a different kind of writing, and it went on for years before anyone noticed what was hanging over the entire arc. Anubis. And while the gods of the Norse Pantheon at least still had recognizable faces and agendas, the divine force introduced in the 2012 series operates on a scale where neither exists. You cannot bargain with Anubis. You can only obey the rules he enforces or be destroyed by them. Because this is not the Anubis of stories. This is the Anubis of structural reality. In the Egyptian tradition, he presides over mummification and the funerary rites. He stands at the weighing of the heart in the Hall of Truth alongside Osiris and Thoth to judge the souls of the dead. And he is the earliest Egyptian deity documented on tomb walls and invoked for the protection of the departed. His symbols, the jackal, the flail, the fetish, strips of mummy gauze, are tied to his role as guardian of eternal justice, a position he maintained even after Osiris displaced him as primary lord of the afterlife. His parentage varies across traditions: son of Nephthys and Osiris in the Middle and New Kingdom, son of Ra in the Old Kingdom, son of Set in some disputed accounts, and he developed out of the earlier jackal god Wepwawet, with whom he is still frequently confused. Cult centers at Lycopolis and Sinopolis kept his worship institutional and his presence in the religious imagination absolutely central for more than 3,000 years. Here's where it gets desperate. Because the 2012 series didn't import that figure for a mythology lesson, it imported him because the Krang had developed a weapon called the Heart of Darkness, and the logical extension of what the Heart of Darkness actually does, destroying all goodness and light in the world, permanently, universally, is Anubis. He is the cosmic authority the heart answers to, the force it channels, and anyone who wields it becomes his conduit on Earth. He does not need to appear in person. He does not need a personality. He functions through artifacts, through the deaths of people caught in his judgment, through the maintenance of a balance that cannot be tipped without the full weight of cosmic consequence falling on whoever did the pushing. Leo nearly becomes that person. The show makes the stakes very, very clear. If the heart is used, the corruption is not limited to a city or a dimension. It is total. It is permanent. It affects every living thing on the planet. And that is the small version of the problem. Because the contradiction this opens, that a land of the dead from Japanese mythology was a place the turtles could physically travel to, visit, and escape from, gets resolved here in the only direction that actually fits what the 2012 series understood about its gods. Anubis is not a place. He is not a being you meet, negotiate with, or defeat in a fight. He is a condition of reality, a rule the universe follows, and the turtles are simply the ones who keep running up against the wrong end of it. The earlier gods could be confronted because they were, at some level, characters. This one is the system, and systems do not yield. Brahma. In the IDW TMNT universe, this isn't your textbook Hindu creator god from ancient scripture. It's something far stranger and far more complicated. Brahma exists as a single entity split into two warring aspects, the dreamer and the dragon, and understanding which one is which changes everything you think you know about the Pantheon itself. The dreamer was created to maintain order, to hold the structure of existence together, while the dragon was created to destroy, born specifically as the force that unravels what the dreamer builds. They aren't equals, and they aren't partners. They are the engine and the wrecking ball, locked in a dynamic that predates every other god the turtles have ever encountered. And here's where it gets stranger. The dragon isn't just another member of the Pantheon, he is the father of the entire group. Every ancient sibling deity pulling strings throughout IDW's TMNT mythos traces its lineage back to this single being, an ancient and immortal deity whose purpose from the moment of creation was destruction. The Dreamer gave the Pantheon their reason for being, their mandate to maintain cosmic order across millennia. The dragon gave them their blood, and with that blood came something the Dreamer could never have planned: a family. The Pantheon, Kitsune, the Rat King, Chi-Yu, and the rest aren't just colleagues in a divine bureaucracy. They are the children of annihilation, carrying their father's destructive nature encoded into their DNA, whether they fight it or not. The boring explanation is that this is just a clever mythological remix, writers borrowing the name Brahma from Hinduism, splitting it into two halves to justify having both a creator god and a destroyer god in the same continuity without theological complications. And that much is probably true as far as it goes, but the facts the boring explanation cannot hold are specific and uncomfortable. The dragon is described explicitly as an ancient and immortal deity, not merely old, not merely powerful, immortal. The dreamer's mandate is order, the dragon's mandate is destruction, and the two were created together as dual aspects of the same being, which means destruction wasn't an accident Brahma slipped into, it was half the design from the start. That implication haunts every decision the Pantheon makes across the entire IDW run. Every internal conflict, every betrayal, every sibling turning on sibling has the dragon's fingerprints on it, whether the gods know it or not. The facts force a single uncomfortable landing. IDW's Brahma isn't a creator god with a dark side, it's a creator god whose very creation was seeded with the seed of its own destruction, and every god born from that seed is carrying out a script written before the universe had a name. Chi-Yu. If Brahma is ancient beyond reckoning, Chi-Yu is the god who proves that even gods can be locked out of their own story. He first appeared in the TMNT universe through the 2014 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Ghostbusters crossover, and he didn't arrive quietly. This was a Chinese emperor turned war deity, an ancient immortal who once led the Nine Li tribe in prehistoric China, and he'd been waiting a very long time for someone to accidentally open the right door. His credentials within the Pantheon are extensive. Member of that group of ancient sibling deities, child of the dragon, brother to Kitsune and the Rat King, and worshipped as a god of war throughout the ages by civilizations that rose and fell while he was still trying to get back into the world. And then it gets worse. His sister Kitsune trapped him between dimensions using interdimensional magic where time and geography simply did not apply. For thousands of years, or maybe just a moment since time doesn't work the same way in a dimensional gap, Chi-Yu was trapped, a god of war with no war left to fight, suspended between realities by the one sibling who apparently understood exactly what he'd do if he ever got out. During that crossover, the dimensional breach they created accidentally freed Chi-Yu from his prison between worlds. The god who walked out of that portal was not a guy you could talk down. Chi-Yu can possess human hosts, and he turned one of the turtles' closest allies, Casey Jones, into a monstrous form, warping one of the turtles' closest allies into something unrecognizable and hostile. He converted ordinary people into an army of enslaved followers. His followers are called thralls, beings whose bodies and minds he controls completely. This is a Pantheon war god operating at full capacity, unshackled from millennia of dimensional imprisonment, and his first act upon release was to begin converting the world's population into his personal army. The Ghostbusters eventually trapped him and sent him through a portal into outer space, which is either a very precise solution or a very lazy one depending on how much you trust dimensional coordinates set by a guy who was definitely making it up as he went. Either way, the trap held for a while. Chi-Yu's appearances across the IDW timeline read like a chronology of things that should have stayed buried. TMNT number 82 in May 2018, TMNT Shredder in Hell number 4 in August 2019, TMNT Annual 2021 number 1 in July 2021, and the Armageddon Game number 8 in July 2023. 4 appearances, 4 separate attempts to re-enter the narrative, 4 reminders that the only reason the Turtles' universe isn't currently ruled by a stadium-sized army of thralls under the command of a possessed Casey Jones is that someone keeps throwing this god into space. Here's the thing the Pantheon's immortality clause actually means. Chi-Yu and the other Pantheon members are effectively immortal. They cannot be permanently killed through any means available to the Turtles, the Ghostbusters, or anyone else operating inside normal physics. The only confirmed permanent death in the Pantheon is the dragon who was killed in the IDW TMNT storyline. Every other member, including Chi-Yu, can be trapped, banished, contained, and thrown into the void, but they will come back. The question isn't whether Chi-Yu escapes again. The question is what the Turtles will be facing when he does, and whether the hockey fans survive the sequel. Toad Baron. If Chi-Yu represented a god brought low, Toad Baron is the opposite kind of failure. A god who never fell at all, who instead let himself fall so completely into pleasure that he forgot what failure even means. He is a member of the IDW Pantheon, And where some of his fellow members carry cosmic weight, Toad Baron carries cosmic indifference. He is the Pantheon's designated hedonist, and he takes the job seriously enough to have built an entire dimension around it. The Den of Delights isn't merely a residence or a throne room. It's a sprawling pleasure complex designed to convert every visitor into a long-term resident, staffed by an entire army of frog minions whose sole function is to keep the operation running at a level of comfort that makes leaving feel like a mistake. His commitment to hedonism goes beyond personal indulgence. Toad Baron genuinely rejoices in getting others to live hedonistically as well. This isn't just a personality quirk, it's a program, an active recruitment strategy dressed up as generosity. The frog staff at the Den of Delights isn't there incidentally. They're the infrastructure of his philosophy, every one of them living proof that his way of life has legs. Running the operation is Alberto, a frog who functions as the head of Toad Baron's staff managing the den. Alberto isn't a generic goon. He's got a title, a role, and a place in the hierarchy that makes him feel like the closest thing Toad Baron has to a right-hand amphibian. The den traps visitors with comfort, making leaving require effort. They have no reason to muster the Pantheon. For whatever reason lets him keep doing it. He doesn't have a grand scheme, no cosmic plot, no plan to overthrow the other members. He just wants everyone to have a good time, permanently, in his dimension, with no obligation to leave. He could talk a turtle into staying for just one more drink and one more night, and suddenly years have passed, which is a kind of power far more insidious than anything involving weapons or armies. The IDW continuity gives us a pantheon full of ancient, serious, world-shaping beings, and sitting somewhere in that roster is Toad Baron, god of the good time, keeper of the Den of Delights, employer of Alberta the Mustachioed Frog, who proves that cosmic power doesn't always come with cosmic purpose. Gothano. They're a member of the immortal Pantheon, that family of cosmic gods that gathers every 100 years, dwelling in the coldest depths of the ocean, where a great number of tentacles creep and crawl from under their mysterious cloak. Their very presence intimidates the Toad Baron's subjects, a reaction none of them experience even around the Rat King. And they speak only when useful, in a voice so low that listeners have no choice but to lean in. The Turtles first met Gothano at their centennial reunion in TMNT number 71, alongside the rest of their Pantheon siblings. The Rat King had other ideas. He visited Gothano at lonely, abandoned beaches, trying to rally the Pantheon siblings for a new game, and when Gothano proved unmoved, he seized Jagwar's sword, set it ablaze, and planted it in Gothano's cloak during the Armageddon game. That single act triggered a cascade. Gothano's death forced Kitsune to use the Turnstone of Cherubai to summon Chi-Yu, whose explosion leveled the Pantheon's location entirely. Here's where it gets worse. Gothano was also involuntarily responsible for a past catastrophe that nearly destroyed all life on Earth, most likely the Great Flood recorded in religious texts across the world. The Keeper of Secrets and Hidden Knowledge was burned alive by a sibling, and the flood was the collateral damage. That demands an explanation. The ordinary one would be that Pantheon siblings kill each other routinely, that the Armageddon game was war and Gothano was a casualty, but the facts don't bear that out. Gothano's domains are secrets and hidden knowledge. Their mere presence produces a biological reaction, petrification, that no other Pantheon member produces. The Toad Baron subjects freeze around Gothano and remain functional around the Rat King, which means Gothano's power is sui generis, not part of some general god rule. A god whose specific domain is hidden knowledge doesn't get killed by accident in a family squabble. They get killed because what they know is dangerous. The flood nearly ended all life on Earth, and Gothano couldn't warn anyone because Gothano was already burning. The Keeper of Secrets was silenced before the catastrophe they'd unwittingly set in motion could be averted. The contradiction resolves into something colder. Gothano's death during the Armageddon game silenced a Keeper of Secrets at a pivotal moment. Kitsune. They first appeared in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Secret History of the Foot Clan, published by IDW Publishing, a Japanese witch and shapeshifter belonging to the mystical animal group called the Pantheon, the same family of cosmic gods that includes Gothano and the Rat King. Kitsune served as the Foot Clan's mage and became Shredder's lover, using her powers to advance the Foot Clan's rise to prominence. After Splinter's coup killed Shredder, Kitsune schemed to resurrect him as the immortal dragon warrior, not as an end in itself, but as a vessel for resurrecting the Pantheon's father, the dragon, with the stated goal of wiping out humanity. She killed Akka, her elder sister, as part of her ritual to resurrect the dragon, and almost every other Pantheon member reacted with shock when they learned her plan. Within the Pantheon, Kitsune's sphere of influence corresponds to Japan, her animal motif is the fox, and she shares the distinction of blue and orange morality alongside Akka and eventually the Rat King. She remains one of the turtles' strongest enemies. In the 2012 animated series, Kitsune appeared as a recurring antagonist. The question nobody has answered is why Kitsune chose Shredder specifically as the vessel for the dragon. The facts establish the plan with brutal clarity. Resurrect the father, wipe out humanity. They establish the method. AKA's divine blood, the ritual, the dragon warrior. They establish the cost. Gothano dead, the Pantheon's location destroyed by Chayu, summoned through the turnstone of Cherubai. But nowhere do the facts explain what made Shredder the right candidate for holding a being that had never walked the earth in the present continuity. His siblings' shock wasn't just moral revulsion, it was the shock of hearing a plan that required something unprecedented. If the dragon's return was the goal, and Shredder was the means, then Shredder had to be capable of sustaining something that had no precedent. The text says nothing about why. The Turnstone of Cherubai had to be activated in direct response to the catastrophe Kitsune helped trigger. That tells you the countermeasure was calibrated to the threat. The threat was calibrated to the vessel. The vessel was Shredder. Why him? The question still hangs. Wyrm. And if you thought that was exotic, brace yourself. Like, the next entry isn't a Japanese deity at all. It's a fourth-dimensional chaos entity Casey Jones accidentally released from a hypercube found on an abandoned spaceship during the 2012 series. That's not a setup. That's the baseline. Wyrm is categorized as a chaos god capable of reality, warping, and destroying space. Itself, once freed from his hypercube prison, which already puts him on a different operating level than any god the Turtles have faced before. A reality-warping entity bound by the constraints of his hypercube prison. Wyrm's power operates within strict constraints tied to his hypercube prison. The only way out is the one Casey found. Casey found a way to undo the catastrophe Wyrm unleashed. Don't confuse him with his lighter roots. Wyrm was originally created for the Archie comic series Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures in 1990. Wyrm returned in IDW's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Universe number 6 after debuting in Archie Comics' Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures in 1990. The IDW Wyrm is more sinister than the original, which means the character's canon progression was toward threat, not away from it. The one detail people remember is the baseball bat thing. When the Turtles tried to fight Wyrm, instead of releasing him with a properly structured third wish, he picked up a baseball bat and attacked them with it. Not some cosmic weapon, a baseball bat. That absurdity is actually the point. Wyrm is the jackass genie, petty, rules-obsessed, and more interested in being clever than being merciful. His design reinforces it, a repulsive humanoid form with an unusually large head. He shouldn't be terrifying to look at, he is. The tension comes from knowing the rules are rigged and watching someone try to find the one loophole that works. Casey is not a mystic. He's a kid with a hockey mask who accidentally broke reality open, and he's the one who solved it. And sure, you could call him a joke villain if you wanted. Genie setups are inherently silly, and a reality warping god getting outwitted by a bonus wish feels cheap, but that objection doesn't hold. The rules are the entire system. Wyrm is dangerous specifically because he grants wishes within a locked framework, which means the wisher is always their own worst enemy. That's not a flaw in the writing. That's the architecture. He doesn't defeat himself. The wisher does. And when the stakes are the structural integrity of space itself, a bonus wish loophole stops feeling like a cop-out and starts feeling like the only way out of an unwinnable situation. What you're actually looking at is a cosmic-level trolley problem designed as a cartoon premise. The mechanism at work isn't genie mythology. It's the 2012 series' willingness to put genuinely high-stakes cosmic horror inside episodes that also feature a guy named Casey Jones hitting a dimension god with a baseball bat. The tonal whiplash isn't a mistake, it's the show's operating principle. Cronus. From interdimensional trickster genies to a titan who can shoot fire from his eyes, and this one is closer than you'd think. The Cronus entry on TMNTpedia identifies him as the king of the Titans in Greek mythology and the father of most of the Olympian gods. The TMNTpedia entry for god defines a deity as a supernatural being considered divine or sacred. Cronus's room is different. He's described as a huge mountain of a man. He is definitely not immobile. He attacks the turtles. He shoots fire from his eyes. The TMNTpedia Cronus article covers his mythological role as King of the Titans. And the reason he still had power becomes the story's real pivot. Deuximax is described on TMNTpedia as a technological being who proclaimed himself the god in the machine. Cronus' role in Greek myth involved overthrowing his father Uranus and later being overthrown by his son Zeus. TMNTpedia classifies Deuximax under the antagonist category for the Mirage continuity. The common assumption is that Cronus is inert mythology, a titan, ancient and overthrown, something that belongs in a history book and not a turtle comic. But in the Halls of Lost Legends, he is physically mobile, aggressive, and armed with fire from his eyes. The overthrow by Zeus happened in Greek myth. The halls are what came after the myth was finished. And in that context, Cronus wasn't resting. He was being farmed. This matters because it reframes every god the turtles have encountered in this continuity. The Halls of Lost Legends aren't a museum. They're a prison with a looting operation running inside it. Cronus is one captured asset among many, and the turtles stumbled into his cell during a heist. That's why Loki's disguise, his name change to Locke, and his siphoning activity are the actual story, not just background world building, but the connective tissue that binds every mythological god the turtles meet in Mirage. Each encounter is a node in the same network. Every god the turtles face might be in the halls. Every god might be a battery. The TMNTpedia God category page lists both Cronus and Deuximax as deity entries. Deuximax. Cronus operated within a single story's walls, but Deuximax extends across the entire machine itself. Deuximax was a technological being who proclaimed himself the god in the machine, and appeared on a computer belonging to Donatello. The four turtles occupy that roster as heroes. Deuximax holds the same list position as their deity. The issue isn't one of scale, but of category. The story's title gives the mechanism, technofear, fear embedded in the machine, a god that lives inside the systems the turtles rely on. A god in the machine doesn't fight with fists, but with infrastructure, and Deuximax's listing treats him as a direct peer to the four named turtles, not an adversary to be defeated, but an equal force in the narrative. The epithet doesn't describe a throne or a temple. It describes a substrate, a god resident in circuits and code, and the machinery of the world itself. The character listing makes Deuximax's nature explicit, and the story title gives the mechanism. You might file Deuximax away as a throwaway villain from a minor TMNT story, a techno-themed antagonist for a single issue, nothing more. But Deuximax proclaimed himself the god in the machine and made known his effort to take over the world. He doesn't waste names or epithets. A creator who built an entire mythology around 4 mutant turtles doesn't accidentally attach the god in the machine to a throwaway character and slot it into the same roster as the 4 heroes. That phrase carries intentional structural weight. The listing alongside Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo is deliberate. Deuximax isn't background noise. He's built into the same character architecture as the protagonists. A god of the machine doesn't announce itself with thunder. It announces itself by being present in the system before you realize the system has a god. And the image that sticks isn't Deuximax himself, it's the roster. 4 named turtles, 1 named god, equal positions on the same list in a story called Technofear, about fear inside the machine. The god in the machine is also the god on the character sheet, and you only notice the architecture after the story is over. Hermes. Hermes appears in a Locke flashback in Halls of Lost Legends, joining figures of myth and legend in a single Mirage story. And the reason is baked into the oldest detail attached to him. The tortoise is one of Hermes' symbols in Greek tradition, associated with wisdom and knowledge. It describes a creature that absorbed nearly every major symbolic category the culture maintained. The tortoise is water and the moon. The tortoise is earth and time and immortality and fertility. 7 domains compressed into a single animal, each one a category that elsewhere in the Pantheon belongs to a separate deity. The lyre Hermes exchanged for his acceptance as a god was constructed from the shell of this tortoise. The caduceus, Hermes' winged staff with 2 serpents, is his identifying symbol, and the tortoise appears alongside it in his iconography. Hermes serves as the herald, as the protector of travelers and merchants and thieves and orators, as the psychopomp conducting souls into the afterlife, and as the divine trickster. Each of those roles touches one of the 7 categories the tortoise carries. The psychopomp touches immortality. The protector of travelers touches water and earth. The herald touches time and knowledge. The trickster touches wisdom. The staff, the caduceus, touches fertility, the shell, and the lyre. The staff is the primary symbol, the winged staff with 2 serpents, carried as his identifying mark wherever Hermes appears. The tortoise appears alongside the staff in his iconography. You might call Hermes just a messenger deity, a courier god, a divine postman with a cool hat. Nearly every tradition has one. The Romans mapped their own equivalent onto Hermes' roles almost wholesale, transferring the attributes, the protections, and the symbol set over intact. If Hermes were just a messenger, that transfer would have covered everything worth transferring. But the tortoise doesn't survive that mapping cleanly, and the tortoise is the detail that breaks the messenger reading entirely. The tortoise carries 7 categories of meaning no courier function needs. A messenger doesn't need to personify fertility or the moon or time. A psychopomp doesn't need to build a lyre from a specific animal's shell and trade that lyre to buy divine status. The tortoise is a vessel for the full symbolic weight of the world, and Hermes carries it. Hermes is the herald, the protector of travelers and merchants and thieves and orators, the psychopomp who conducts souls into the afterlife, and the divine trickster. And he is also the god who built his first divine instrument from a creature that personified 7 worlds and traded it for a seat at the table. Those 2 readings cannot both be reduced to a single job description, and the caduceus, winged staff, 2 serpents, marks the door between them. Loki. The tortoise is described as a symbol of wisdom and knowledge, able to defend itself on its own, and as personifying water, the moon, the earth, time, immortality, a self-contained philosophy wrapped in a shell. Loki is the Norse god of lies and treachery, often serving as an antagonist in stories involving him. Loki exists outside the conventional order of the Norse gods, serving as a force of chaos and deception. Loki engineers the death of the beloved god Balder and is bound as punishment, later breaking free at Ragnarok. The cult operates as his instrument in the mortal world, carrying out ritual violence and subterfuge across the urban landscape, and their reach is not incidental or scattered. They are organized, numerous, and embedded enough in the city's infrastructure to pose a sustained, escalating threat rather than a momentary disruption. Their effectiveness comes from their structure. They are not a loose gathering of the curious or the desperate, but a disciplined apparatus that moves with coordination and intent, each member a potential extension of Loki's will, each act of violence a ritual act that furthers his reach. The threat they represent is not limited to individual confrontations, but extends to the slow, deliberate reshaping of the world around them, inch by inch, block by block, until the ground itself feels unreliable and the distinction between order and chaos has eroded beyond easy recognition. Loki does not beat the turtles. He unravels the conditions under which fighting even makes sense. His power works by exploiting assumptions rather than overpowering opponents. The turtles are trained to read an opponent's technique, anticipate their movement, and counter it with superior discipline. None of that preparation helps against an enemy who can make the terrain itself unreliable, who can alter the sequence of events so that preparation becomes meaningless, who can make allies uncertain and enemies unpredictable without ever throwing a punch. The entire ninja arts toolkit, anticipation, counter, adaptation, is built on a world that follows consistent rules. Loki's cult doesn't break those rules, they exploit the cracks in them. The Mirage writers built an antagonist whose power is structural rather than physical, and that choice reflects something specific about what they wanted this fight to mean. By making Loki's weapon reality distortion rather than brute force, they forced a confrontation where courage and martial skill are necessary but not sufficient, where the turtles have to learn to fight in a world that is actively refusing to behave consistently, against an enemy whose greatest weapon is making their own training feel like a liability. That is a harder story to tell, and a more interesting one, than simply pitting them against a stronger brawler. Odin, where Loki's cult wore divine authority as borrowed camouflage, Odin is the source of that authority made flesh. His legitimacy was never in question. The cult was merely a perversion of something that actually exists in Mirage continuity in its full and legitimate form. And that distinction changes everything about what the turtles are up against. References to Odin in the TMNT multiverse draw from his Norse myth origins, but he is not depicted as an active, physically present character shaping events in the Mirage continuity. His power operates on a scale that dwarfs anything previously encountered. Odin, as known from Norse mythology, is the ruler of the Norse Pantheon, commanding wisdom and mythic authority. He is not merely powerful within the story, he is the architect of systems of power that structure the world the turtles inhabit, and his motivations operate on a timescale and a level of consequence that mortal concerns barely register against. Odin is known in myth for sacrificing his eye for wisdom and hanging from Yggdrasil, but in TMNT context these stories remain mythic background, not central elements of power in the turtles' world. This is not Thor, who meets threats head-on with a hammer. This is not Loki, who wins through misdirection and chaos. This is Odin, strategic, deliberate, and backed by authority that has been purchased and proven through acts of cosmic cost. He intervenes not to test or to toy, but to enforce a design that spans mortal and divine realms alike, and Loki exploited assumptions. Odin makes assumptions irrelevant by being exactly what he appears to be. Nexus. Where Odin's power was vast but personal, a ruler who intervened through choice and design, this entity operates without personality, purpose, or the capacity to be reasoned with at all. Its reach extends not to specific targets but to everything within its zone simultaneously, altering the space around it wholesale rather than picking its battles or directing its force against particular opponents. It does not act upon the world through intermediaries or instruments. It is a presence that rewrites the environment itself, where the ordinary rules governing physics, distance, and cause and effect no longer hold in their familiar form. Creatures and objects caught within its influence are subject to transformations that follow no pattern the turtles have learned to read, no sequence they can anticipate or interrupt, no rhythm they can time a counter against. What is at stake when Nexus appears is not injury or defeat, but the reliability of the space the turtles stand on. A zone where the ground itself can shift without warning, where distance and direction lose their usual meaning, where the training and instincts that keep them alive in every other fight become untrustworthy. That is not a conventional threat. It is a structural collapse of the conditions that make combat intelligible in the first place, and there is no technique, no strategy, no teamwork that can compensate for an environment that has stopped following its own rules. It is not acting, it is not choosing. The Battle Nexus is a dimension in TMNT lore where turtles from different realities interact, generally functioning as a multiversal arena.